the SCLA, and it is my pleasure to bring you Stephen Jones. He is the VP of IT, Supply Chain, and Research and Development at Campbell's. And this is the C-Suite Commentary. So Stephen, that is a lot of responsibility in one title there. And I know that, IT and the omni-channel are very tightly linked as we're moving with all businesses into more and more omni-channel and trying to meet the demands of our customer. How do you think that push is altering the supply chain?
Well, omni-channel is very interesting. I think e-commerce, I've seen several quotes that e-commerce has grown as much in the last 6 months as was expected in the next 5 years with the pandemic. So it's really changing the way that we're engaging with consumers. And I think one of the big things that's from an IT perspective that we need to be thinking about is if you're a brick and mortar business and an online business, and you have an out of stock situation, it's one thing for someone to walk up to a brick and mortar and encounter that it's out of stock. But if you go onto the system and order something and you think you got an order through, but later we come back and say, oh, actually, our click and collect system went to go get it and it wasn't there. The user experience is very negative. So I think linking these IT systems together for those businesses is a big change, and it's very challenging for them to do that. Mm-hmm. Obviously, we don't want them to ever experience any out of stocks, but when you want them to know up front. You don't want to have the supply chain not meeting their expectations, but also the website that they're going to not meeting their expectations. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges in our industry right now for making sure that we give that good user experience when people are buying stuff. And I also think that there's a lot of complexity about returns. So, returning do you go to the store and drop it off? You bought it on the website. You don't, there's something wrong with it. It's expired or whatever might be the case. So I think that creates another challenge for how does that return exactly happen? Mm-hmm. So it's really emerging. It's going to be a very long road for the overall organization to deal with e-commerce and how it's changed the way we need to supply to our consumers.
Absolutely. And I think, as you said, in the last 2020 really accelerated that race to fulfillment. And we've all experienced that, where you get there and you've got the item and they say there's 10 and you order one and then it comes back to you and says out of stock. So right. I do agree with you with the frustration. So yeah, that's great. And how do you think the expectations for executive management have changed? There's just so much pressure, not only to, keep the ship afloat, but to, lift it ever higher as far as revenue.
You're right. To say that we have a lot going on is kind of an understatement. I think a lot of the work that we had in place prior to the pandemic hitting is still there. It's not, it's still work that we have to execute and get completed. But we've piled on top of that a significant amount of other work really associated with things we've learned that aren't working well. We have activities around allocations that we didn't have to deal with before. That's been quite a bit of work. And we have a lot more data visibility questions that we're getting. So we've got several projects that have been added to our plate in order to help resolve understanding where is all of the business. So supply chain control tower investment that we're making. But quite honestly, as an IT professional, it's been exciting because a lot of the transformations that we want and we've been talking about with our business partners have become so much more relevant. And the relevance of IT has grown immensely during the pandemic. Just something simple like using tools like we're on right now have grown immensely in the past 6 months. And there were days, if you go back a year, when we would be in meetings and someone's supposed to join something like a Zoom call, and they really just don't know how. They don't know how to share. They don't know how to make the right connections. They have trouble with their voice. Those have all been learned very quickly, and it's really transformed how people are engaging with each other from a remote basis because they had to. They didn't have the luxury of saying, I don't need to learn this. Now they just have to.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a really good point. They don't have the luxury to say, I don't need to learn this. And I think all of us, whether we're at the executive level or whatever level we are professionally in our lives, have got to be pushing the envelope and reaching out and embracing and new technologies and new ways of doing things. And with the understanding that ultimately, I think it'll make our lives better, the workplace is better. But, a lot of talk. People are pretty happy. They're working from home. Granted, they're working more hours than ever. That's what I hear. But they do have a certain amount of freedom. There's a lot of speculation that this might be what the workplace of the future looks like, kind of a hybrid. So in your opinion, how do you predict that the environment in which your team is working, how that's going to change in the future?
So our team is indeed mostly remote at this point, and we're operating that way until the safety of our employees is assured. But I really believe that we will get more into the office and traveling again, because there's some things that we've missed. Right, the first few months it felt like it was a huge productivity boost. People could focus and less distractions with people dropping by. But really, there's a few things that we're missing. I certainly haven't been into a plant for 7 months, which is an extremely long time at this point for me to not go in, see the users interacting with the tools that we've developed for them, and really getting that direct feedback from an operator, right? We're getting third-hand feedback on what's needed. It helps much more to have that direct feedback. I think that the hallway conversations, even the community that you have of your group around how's the kids, how's the wife, that stuff is missing. So I think breakdown of our community is happening with this extended away from the office. And, I personally believe that we're going to get back to that and have more of it. And then one that I really miss is kind of the pre and post meetings, where you drop into a meeting, it hasn't quite started, you sit down the next one, and you strategically sit yourself down to the person that you really want to have an influential conversation with. And you're really not able to do that in a virtual session, because essentially on the screen, you're not talking one-to-one, you're talking to everybody in the room. And you might want to have that private conversation on the side, either at the beginning or the end of a meeting. And I really think that helps with influencing. So I do think that we will get back in the office, but I also believe there will be some changes, right? I do think that we will have more flexibility for people to work remote when they need to. They're going to be more comfortable to do that. So I do believe there will be hybrid situations, but I also expect fully that we will pull people back. And I think a number of the things I've read, even from a place like Microsoft, has said they're missing some things when everybody is away from the office all the time, and bringing people back. I think it'll bring the culture along and be able to have that community that we're missing right now.
Yeah, I think that's excellent. I agree with you. And as an executive over the course of your career, what have been some of your biggest challenges and accomplishments?
So biggest accomplishments, I think in some cases within the IT organization, we get focused on delivering a project, but we lose focus on delivering the business results. So I think one of the biggest accomplishments, and I think back about some big projects that I worked on in my career, and reflecting back with some of the people who you're working with on, wow, we just worked on $1 billion business and we delivered this for them, and we're making them more efficient, even by 0.5% or 1%. That is a tremendous amount of business value. And sometimes people don't recognize that the reason they're in these projects isn't to deliver the project, but it's to deliver the outcome. So I think for me, the biggest accomplishments has been helping people recognize and deliver outcomes versus delivering an item. I could get into specifics, but probably take far too long to have that kind of conversation. But it's delivering the outcomes has been one of my biggest accomplishments, and focusing on the outcomes. So as far as challenges, it's been, I think, when we get what I would call analysis paralysis. There's 4 or 5 ways you can go. The group decides they want to rethink about it. You come back together and we again rethink about it. So I've certainly been in a number of cases where we spend as much time thinking about it and we lose that opportunity to deliver. So if you spend 6 months or a year to make a decision to deliver something, you've got 6 months or a year of value that you're not capturing. And in some cases, that's more than the time we spent to go figure it out. So I think that's been one of the biggest challenges, is being able to break through the very difficult decisions when there are 2, 3, 4 different good options, and just say, listen, we don't want to get the perfect option. Let's pick one. It's good enough, and we'll move forward, and we'll adjust as we go along. But that can be very difficult when you're talking about multi-million-dollar investments.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a lot of responsibility to call it right, and I'm sure you have called them more times right than not. But
hopefully so.
Right. From an IT perspective, what do you think the future of 21st century America is going to look like?
Well, from an IT perspective, I think in the next 10 and 20 years, the growth of robotics and automatic driving vehicles is really going to change the industry significantly. So I was hoping that maybe during my work time, I would be a part of doing that, but it may be a little after I've retired that those kind of technologies come to fruition. But I do fully believe you're going to have automatic truck driving happening, that you're going to have warehouse operations that's very robotic and happening versus the very manual processes that we have today. So I think that is going to be a tremendous change in industry. And I know as I've talked with some of my peers and coworkers about these kind of things, I've certainly heard a lot of people say, wow, I just couldn't trust a truck to be driven by a computer. And then I asked them, but we can trust that a person drives that computer who may be falling asleep or maybe didn't have a very good night and drank too much last night. But we trust that. And if you look at how many accidents we have in the trucking industry, for me, I think automation is going to be a vast safety improvement as well. So I'm looking forward to that personally, but I do know it's very challenging, because if there is an accident with an automatic driven truck, there's going to be huge thoughts that, hey, we can't let computers do this. It's not okay. But we do lose perspective that humans make mistakes, and more often than a computer. So I really think that's going to be a huge change in industry over the next 10, 20, maybe 30 years. And I'm really looking forward to seeing it. It's exciting stuff.
Right. Well, we are having such a talent shortage, and there's more jobs out there, particularly in transportation and trucking, than there are people to fill them. So it does seem like that is a great solution. But I agree with some of your hesitancies, and the acceptance just within the culture, I think, is the biggest stumbling block.
Yeah.
Not so much the technology at this time. But most people have said COVID has brought about some positive changes. And one thing is it's really accelerated the pace of change with IT. And you mentioned that earlier in the interview, that, things that you didn't think could get done have gotten done in 6 months. So, do you want to maybe comment on that, what specifically you've seen move the needle, and how you project that might continue to be a trend moving forward?
Sure. I'll bring up two things. The first one is our transition from one collaboration tool to a new collaboration tool. We had plans to do it. It was probably going to be at the end of calendar 2020 that we would kick it off. But when COVID hit, it got accelerated, and it happened very, very fast. I think we probably transitioned from our old tool to the new tool in 2 months. And quite honestly, the adoption was tremendous, and the feedback was tremendous. I mean, people were so appreciative to get a tool that was better for collaboration in this environment. I think if it had been in the office, it would have taken us 6, 9, 12 months. And even after that 12-month period, we'd still have people who are like, I just go to the meeting, I'm fine. But they just, as I said earlier, they don't have any choice, and they've learned it, and they find that it's actually pretty easy, and it's quite helpful for them to have this capability. And many people who didn't share screens in the past are now sharing screens because they know how. They learned it very quickly. Another one for us that's been a big one is supply chain control tower. Mm-hmm. Really, it came in as a concept about 2 months into the pandemic. We got it approved about 2 months later with a pretty significant spend, and we'll have it delivered by the end of the calendar year. So from concept to delivery in under 6 months, really, for us is pretty tremendous. We never, I think, would have been able to do that without this real catalyst happening in COVID-19.
Mm-hmm. Great. A lot of talk about 5G. That's one of the great game changers. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think it's going to live up to the hype?
Well, it's certainly overhyped, I think. And there's a couple things about 5G which I think are interesting, which I will tell you that this morning I bought a new iPhone with 5G, but I am an early adopter. I bought the iPhone mini this morning. But I think that there's really two reasons that it's overhyped. One is it talks about speed. And really, if you think about your corporate Wi-Fi networks, they're as fast or faster than the 5G speeds already. So as you look at how is it going to change the fixed networks, it probably isn't. There's too many cost implications of going to 5G. The other part I think that's really overhyped is, well, how much is really out there? And do we have a nationwide 5G network? In some cases, you have the carriers who are saying that they have a 5G network, but the reality is they've taken their 4G networks, done some software maintenance and sped them up, and then called it 5G from a marketing perspective. There's no governance over whether they call it 4G or 5G. And if you recall, when we made the transition from 3G to 4G, you heard 4G and then you heard 4G LTE. 4G LTE was actually the new technology. 4G was just marketing. So we're getting a little bit of that right now. So it's ahead of itself on what's really available. But I do think there's going to be some really cool stuff that comes. And one that comes to mind for me is, when we stand up a new warehouse, it takes a long time to get a network put in there, especially if it's in a remote location. We have to do trenching to get the wires out there. With 5G and the speeds that you get, we could basically stand up a new warehouse in a couple days, bringing in the wireless equipment, and then be there for a month or two and then leave. So the ability to get in and out of a facility, I think, is going to be very fast where we have those needs. And certainly when you have surges for special situations, it's going to be a great capability. I also think that, a lot of the communications with trucks is going to be something that could be interesting. And as we talked about the automatic vehicles, there are some companies that are looking at having the trucks be driven like a drone in the military, right? Mm-hmm. So you drive the truck, but you're actually sitting at a computer screen somewhere not in the truck, and you might be able to drive 5, 6, 7 trucks at once, as kind of let it automatically manage itself, but then you kind of help in the tricky spots. That's going to require something like 5G, right? You're going to need to have that. 5G brings two things: speed, and it brings the distance that the communications travel. So I think 5G being truly international for us, or at least where your trucks are, is going to be necessary for that kind of functionality to really work well. So I think that's really exciting stuff. Mm-hmm. I also know there's really creative people out there that are coming up with things that I couldn't even imagine. Over the next few years, that's going to be more and more happening with the 5G. So I think it will happen. It's just probably early. I think that 5G stuff is not really out in our US, at least, very broadly yet.
Yeah, but it's on your iPhone, Stephen.
And when I receive it in a week.
Okay. All right. Good. Yeah. Okay. Great. I love that. So, with mobility and flexibility, but all in all, I love the picture you're painting of a future. Definitely a better place, more connected, more collaborative, and at the speed that we are moving and need to keep up with just the advancements that are going on. Well, Stephen, it's been a great pleasure. Thank you so much for your time. I'm so glad that you joined us here on the C-Suite Commentaries.
Thank you.